Welcome to this class. Today we're going to be looking at the rest of Hebrews, Hebrews chapter 7, verses 26 to 28. And today we are going to be looking at the differences between Jesus as high priest and the high priest in the Old Covenant. And so we start off, I'm just going to read this paragraph, this final few verses in chapter 7. For it was indeed fitting that we should have such a high priest, holy, innocent, unstained, separated from sinners, and exalted above the heavens. He has no need, like those high priests, to offer sacrifices daily, first for his own sins and then for those of the people, since he did this once for all when he offered up himself. For the law appoints men in their weakness as high priests, but the word of the oath, which came later than the law, appoints a son who has been made perfect forever. I encourage you, if you haven't, to just meditate on these verses. It is incredible to meditate on who Jesus is and just his superiority, his greatness, his amazingness. And these verses are some just great verses to meditate on, to deepen our Christology, to deepen our appreciation of Jesus, who he is, what he has done. But let's jump in. I think what I really like about this is we fully kind of finish the comparing and contrasting between Jesus as high priest and the Levitical priesthood, and we get so many great statements. So first thing that we see here, the difference is that Jesus was appointed by oath, right? He received his appointment by oath, which was the oath of God that he was going to establish this priesthood forever. We covered that in last class. The Levitical high priest was appointed by the law. And so we've already established how this new covenant is a better hope, is a better covenant. And the law was not able to save and make perfect to the utmost like Jesus was able to save to the utmost. And so we already see that Jesus' appointment was better. His appointment came by the indestructible, unchangeable, permanent oath of God, while the appointment of the Levitical high priest came from the law, which had weakness. Jesus is holy, innocent, unstained, separated by sinners, and exalted above the heavens. 5 beautiful statements about Jesus. I encourage you, remember and memorize that about Jesus. He is holy, innocent, unstained, separated from sinners, and exalted above the heavens. These first 3 that we see, holy, innocent, and unstained, actually have really important significance in how we think about the priesthood. So the holy, this was Jesus's religious qualification for being the great high priest. Innocent, this was Jesus's moral qualification for being the great high priest. Unstained was Jesus's cultic qualification for being high priest. All 3 of these things, different facets of the priesthood that were incredibly important, that set him apart than any other priest known in all of the Jewish religion and people, their cultic practices from the very beginning. No other priest or high priest could say that. Why? It says it right here. He has no need, like those high priests, to offer sacrifices daily for his own sins and then for those of the people. So the high priest had to offer first sacrifices. They would sacrifice a bull for their own sins, and then they would sacrifice a goat for the sins of the people. And Jesus did not have to perform the sacrifice of the bull because he was holy, innocent, and unstained, meaning he was already there, a greater high priest, and he doesn't offer a goat as sacrifice. He offers himself as the greater sacrifice. We'll get more into that as we read through Hebrews 8 and 9. But Jesus is a greater high priest because he doesn't even need to do what the other high priests needed to do because of their own sinfulness, because of they were unholy, uninnocent, and stained by the world. Unclean is another way of saying that if we think of Torah language. He was separated by sinners. He was exalted above the heavens. Again, nothing that the other high priest could say. He is perfect forever. Again, sets him apart from the other high priest. This other big compare and contrast was Jesus offers sacrifice once. once for all, meaning there was only one sacrifice that he needed to offer, that was himself. It was only needed to be offered once. It was the perfect sacrifice, and it was the permanent sacrifice. No other sacrifice was needed. It was perfect. It was permanent. It was perfect. It was the only thing that was needed. And so because of that, he offered it once, and that's good for all of human history. It's good for all time, future, past, and present. But the other high priest, they had to offer sacrifices continually. In fact, they offered it daily. Why? Because their sacrifice was not perfect. It was not permanent. It was a type and shadow of the sacrifice that we get in Jesus, but it was not the perfect sacrifice. And so again, he offers the perfect sacrifice. He offers the permanent sacrifice that sets him apart than the Levitical high priesthood and makes him a greater high priest. And the last thing is that that we have seen the compare and contrast is that his priesthood is permanent, but we see that the high priesthood and Levitical system, that they were prevented by death for continual service, meaning, they are human only, like you and I, and so they died, and because of that, they could not have a permanent priesthood. Their priesthood would come to an end, and there would be another high priest that was appointed. Yet in Jesus, since he conquered death and resurrected, he has a permanent priesthood because he will and cannot ever die. He will never die, cannot ever die, and because of that, he stands in a permanent priesthood. The point of all of this is the author is trying to communicate this to this church that is struggling, that we have a fully effective priest. There is nothing deficient in him. There is nothing about him that is impermanent. It is by the oath of God, whose unchanging word cannot change. He said this is forever. And because of this, we have a high priest who is fully effective and able to bring us into the presence of God immediately whenever we need it, and to be our help at all times, as he said several times at this point. He is able to make intercession for us at all times, and he is Son. So his title isn't just high priest. We end it with God who appoints him, right? Has appointed him. He appoints a son, and that son is perfect forever. He is sufficient. He is able to save to the utmost. There's nothing lacking in his priesthood, and anyone that wants to draw near to God can through him at any moment, any day. Don't wait for a gathering. Don't wait for tomorrow. Know that right now, Jesus saves to the utmost, and you can draw near to God through him because his priesthood is sufficient. His priesthood is fully effective, and we are able to enter in through him. I hope that gives you some thoughts to pray on today, to reflect on, to really change the dynamic of how you come to God. Know that you come to him not based off your own works, your own righteousness, your own salvation, but you come to him because you have a fully effective and great high priest who, when you go through him, you can go to God at any time, at any moment in your life. Thanks for joining today. Hope to see you for our next class as we begin to dive into Hebrews chapter 8.